Welcome to Pub Natter, hosted by Tim Ives and Justin Perry. We both moved to Rutland over 20 years ago, but our careers kept us away from home, so we don't know as much about the county as we should. So we thought, now that we're getting old and slowing down, how can we meet interesting folk and learn as much about Rutland as possible? The answer is to host a podcast, or is that a pubcast? We hope to host each podcast in a different pub in and around Rutland, so we get an excuse to visit a new pub every week or so, whilst letting interesting, mostly local people and organisations tell their stories and at the same time promoting the ales and the pubs. We have plenty to choose from in Rutland, so this project could take some time. We have spent many hours in pubs up and down the land discussing every topic you could possibly imagine. We sit on opposite sides of the political spectrum and are probably the only two friends in Rutland that didn't fall out over the Brexit referendum. Given this and our backgrounds, Tim, Royal Air Force, dental healthcare and postgraduate education, and Justin, construction industry and construction law specialist, we reckon we have got the skills to get our teeth into our subjects and build some stories for our listeners. Most episodes will start with 10 or 15 minutes with the landlord, discussing their backstory, the history of the pub and its offerings, and then a special guest with a special interest area of expertise. We hope you enjoy our chats and it encourages you to go out and explore our little county and all that it has to offer. Like the motto says, there is much in little. When rain stops play, it's time for some Pub Natter. Hi, Pub Natter listeners. Tonight we are talking to you from the Railway Inn, a 170-year-old pub in the village of Ketton in Rutland. We'll be having a natter with the landlord, Jamie Betts, about the history of the pub, his ludicrously eventful start to his landlording career, and his family connection to the village, not to forget the inspiration for the name of the pub dog. We then turn our attention to Rich Harris, the chair of the Rutland branch of CAMRA. That's the campaign for real ale for the uninitiated. He'll be nattering about what CAMRA does and giving us a bit of insight into what makes a real ale. Not giving too much of away, but there is a lot more to CAMRA than beards and big jumpers. On my left is Justin Perry, our co-presenter, and on my right is Jamie Betts, the landlord of the Railway Inn. In a moment, we're going to be having a chat with Jamie, but first of all, Justin's been digging into the history of the Railway Inn, and he's going to give us a little bit of an introduction.
Well, digging is a little bit of an exaggeration, but 20 minutes on Google is about all it took. But so obviously we were coming to talk to Jamie about the pub and his history here, so I thought I'd do a little bit of digging and delving before we did. One of the first things I learned was that NIMBYism is not a new thing. And back in 1846, when they were putting the railway between Peterborough and Syston, which eventually gave rise to this pub and its name, there was a lot of objection from a local landowner, and it was actually delayed by 2 years. So even 170 years ago, the problems they've had with with the HS2 were same sort of thing was happening even then. So the railway came through in 1848, 2 years late. At that time, there was one or maybe two pubs in the village, but once the railway was in place, it became a bit of a brewing centre, and the number of pubs grew quite rapidly. And I think that the railway was one of the pubs that sprung up in between 1850 and 1890. And now, there were 11, I think, at peak. And
wow.
Now the railway is the last man standing.
12 or 13, I think. 12. I'm sure there was 12, but there could have possibly been a 13th. We did go on a tour a few years ago around the village and saw some of the pubs, which was fascinating.
I mean, people must used to have drank a lot more in those days, surely.
They probably didn't work as hard. Or they did, but it was something to look forward to at the end of the day.
Because the population of the village has gone up, hasn't it?
Definitely.
And the pubs have come down.
Yes.
Wow.
And I think that beer was probably a safer thing to drink than water.
Yeah.
In the 1840s and 50s. Water was certainly not the standard as it is today.
No.
During the research, most of the stuff I found out came from the Ketton Historical Society, which I think has stopped meeting because I can't find anything from them post-COVID.
No, I'm not aware of anyone in the Historical Society, unfortunately.
They were very regular. They had monthly meetings and published minutes, and they explore a different topic every month. So there's quite a lot of information there. And one of the things they've got is a kind of crime and punishment section. And there was a lot of public drunkenness in Ketton back in the 1850s and 60s.
Some things never change.
But you don't get pilloried now if you get caught.
No.
So that was what I found out about the pub. And then I looked into Jamie and his history in the pub, which is quite recent. Took over in 2019, just before COVID.
That's right. 6 months before.
Yeah, 4 months in, you got your first award from CAMRA,
which we were very pleased to receive.
Which is an extraordinary achievement after only 4 months.
Yeah, I think some of the credit needs to go to the previous landlord in a certain extent, because he wouldn't have got Pub of the Year if he hadn't have got Pub of the Season. But obviously it was
That's very noble of you to say that.
Yeah, well, I think it's only right to do so.
Yeah.
But
so what's the recipe? What's the recipe for success? What did he have that you've continued?
I think I probably bettered it. I went into it with an open mind. I mean, I like my ale. I love my ale. And we took on the pub at the start, but we knew that things were a bit staid. We knew that I found a picture today, actually, of a picture of me just behind the bar, and it was 1050 Osprey JHB. 1050 JHB Osprey every week.
So what you're saying is the previous landlord was very creative.
I think he probably just gave people what they wanted, but wasn't necessarily wanting to think that there's so many ale brewers out there. And my stance on it was the fact that I wanted to bring variety to everybody. There was only the 3 hand pulls, but the fourth one was there but inoperable. My first ambition was to try and get that up and running, because I wanted to try and support our local brewer, being Baker's Dozen. Once that was up and running, and it proved that there was a lot of excitement about something new on the bar, then it kind of triggered, well, just keep changing things around a little bit and going further afield. And that was when I started to find my feet in the pub and just introducing different ales, because it's okay having the same 3 ales on all the time, but there's hundreds, and there's so many ales out there that variety is the spice of life. So it kind of triggered something with me, and I just needed to try and continue it.
Brilliant.
So having made a great start, you then got hit by COVID, again, barely 5 or 6 months into your career as a landlord. There are an awful lot of establishments that have been going around a lot longer who COVID finished them, but you've survived, and as we'll come on to later, you've thrived. Again, could you tell us how you coped with that? Because that must have been an absolute
It was a difficult
blow.
time. Obviously, I'd come out of the printing industry to take the pub on, which I was in for over 30 years since I left school. And then after a few months, my wife's job sort of changed, and the pub was going so well that she came on board with me. So at the time when COVID just arrived and they started to announce the potential of shutdowns, this was our only income. So when your back's against the wall like that, I think you never work harder to try and make sure that you're going to ride the storm effectively. And that's exactly what we started to do. We bought some flagons, some 4-pint flagons before lockdown. The council, it was very grey, wasn't it, with the councils as to whether off sales would be allowed or not, and they were quite kind of supportive. And as soon as we knew that they were allowed, it was one of our very good villagers in the pub, Mr. Dave LaVenture, I'm sure he won't mind a shout out. He was someone that sort of suggested to me, he said, you want to get a WhatsApp group together and put a sign in the window and people will support you. And that's exactly what we did. And then within a couple of weeks, you have to start thinking about how you're going to deliver these things, and that's when the invention of the flag and wagon arrived.
So I'm conjuring up a romantic image of a horse-drawn dray. I suspect it...
In an ideal world, it would have been that way.
What was it?
It was my mountain bike. It was my mountain bike with an attachment which went onto the rear of it, on the rear axle, and it held 12 4-pint flagons at a time.
I guess we should describe what a flagon is to somebody who...
Flagon is just it's just a little brown capsule, if you like, that will hold 4 pints of ale. And that was our saviour, because we sold 1 flagon of ale on the first day of lockdown. And then by the time VE Day weekend came around, which I think was was it about May?
8th of May, VE Day.
April, May.
Yeah.
That weekend we sold 91 flagons of real ale.
Blimey, people are obviously desperate.
People were supportive.
And probably needed supporting.
People were very supportive, and it was brilliant. We only did it on a Friday. Well, we did it all weekend, but Friday was the key day. Wednesday was the day that we put the message out, and we started off obviously selling 1 barrel, but it soon became more and more popular. So we went to 2 barrels, 3 barrels, 4 barrels, and Dean's Electric Landlady was at the time it was the record-breaking, fastest-selling ale, which people were in the village they were sat by their phones listening, because I always had written a message about all the ales, described all the ales. We had our spreadsheet ready, and then at 6 o'clock exactly, the message would go out, and we would just be inundated. People were just sitting there waiting to hear what the options were. And we knew that we could only get 15 flagons, roughly, 15 flagons out of a barrel before that barrel would sell out. So I think Electric Landlady sold out in 9.5 minutes. Because we were there, and you'd be getting a message back saying, I'll have that one, and I'll have that one, and I'll have that one. And you had to gauge. Luby would be sat there adding them all up on the spreadsheet, and as soon as it got to 15, you'd have to sort of send a quick WhatsApp message out saying, right, Electric Landlady's all sold out now. But you knew that about 3 or 4 minutes later, someone would send a message, Electric Landlady, please.
Do you know,
no, it's sold out. Oh, I'll have that one instead.
I can envisage you in like 30, 40 years' time,
Selling
around
this
a fire,
story.
like talking about post-pandemic stories. You're telling everybody about your flagon story.
People are fascinated about it, and they're sort of, they are fascinated and very pleased that we did what we did during lockdown, as we were, because we needed to make ends meet. And
brilliant.
It did rekindle ingenuity to some extent. People had to find a way, and people found all sorts of different ways. So, and then, did you struggle with the other end of it? Because obviously you were being able to sell it to people, but you then need to bring in the stock. Was that difficult to obtain?
It wasn't as difficult as people perhaps thought. I know there was some horror stories on the news about brewers that were tipping ale away. People that wanted to try and survive carried on brewing when they could. And they were allowed to deliver it. We were allowed to serve it and deliver it under certain circumstances. But no, we didn't have too much of a problem. We started a lot of Oakham ales, a lot of Grain Store, Baker's Dozen, Neen Valley Brewery, which was good, because if they hadn't have been able to brew and supply, then obviously there was no business.
Yeah. So something that Justin really picked up that I thought was quite interesting is that you are the only pub in Rutland that doesn't sell food.
I'm proud of it.
So tell us about that. How do you manage that?
It's always going to be that way. The Railway Inn's always been a non-serving food pub because the kitchen's just there. It's not even big enough to swing a cat in it. So it's just one of those things where we are well supported by the community, and it is a pub where people come, and in a way it is our unique selling point, because there's so many pubs out there in the whole country that are food orientated that every time a customer walks through the door, they're presented with a menu.
Yeah.
And it's going to cost X amount of pounds, whereas where the country's, I think, going wrong slightly is that people need this sort of establishment because they just want to be social.
Yeah.
People want to come down and have a chat without having to be presented with a menu.
Sure. Mental health.
Yeah, especially after the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, it is my pet hate. There's a pub near us. I won't give any names away, but it's food.
Mm-hmm.
And you walk in the door, and they ask you to go and take you to a seat.
I know.
And it's like, I don't want to go to a seat. I want to come sit
I've
at
come
the
to a
bar.
public house.
Oh, no. So, yeah, you're right. I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. We have our little moments where, we have a fish and chip van that comes on a Monday night, has done for 30 years. We've got plates, we've got sauces, cutlery, and everyone knows it, so they come along. We open at 4:30, they come and have a drink or two. The chip van comes at 5:30, 5:45, and then they all come in and eat the fish and chips. And then we all just clear the plates.
I think that's a date night for me and Julie.
It's date night for many of people.
Well, I've got to say that the beer is worthy of coming. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Yeah. There were a couple of other things. One of the things I discovered is your surname is Betts, and there were Betts in the village as far back as 1841, and they did seem to diminish in number to the point there was only one shown in 1911. But I'm just wondering, do you know whether you're from that same line?
I can take you back to 1911. It's my father's grandparents. My grandmother was born in the houses just past the windmill, just outside Ketton. She was married at Ketton Church. She moved to Stamford after that, but her parents, Jack and Ethel, they would have been here in 1911 because my grandmother was born in 1930 in those cottages. So I can take you back to about 1911 when Jack and Ethel would have been here. I can't take you back as far as 1848.
But the likelihood is
that most likely
a direct line descendant.
Mm-hmm.
So your family has been here longer than the pub.
It's fantastic, isn't it?
and here you are, 160, 170 years after the pub was founded,
running it,
and
the pub that I used to come into when I was 18, obviously.
Fantastic.
That's quite extraordinary.
Mm.
So what's the future of the Railway Inn and Jamie Betts?
Well, we intend to stay here for as long as people will have us, and we're fit and well to do so. Obviously, like you say, 4 or 5 weeks ago, we completed the deal and have taken it on in sole ownership now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It is one of those things where, with the news, the negative news that you hear going on in the country at the moment, you do think to yourself, have we done the right thing? But you've got to be positive because we believe we've done the right thing. And if it stays as buoyant as it is now, then the only way is up.
Well, so we came along tonight thinking, 6:30, 7 o'clock, we'll just sit in the corner. There'll only be half dozen people in there, and of course we couldn't park, and we wondered what was going on. And then we came in, and the place is absolutely rammed, which is why we had to go into this little snug to produce the podcast, because you can't be heard in there. So you're clearly doing something right.
Yeah.
Just need to give you a shout out as well. Congratulations on winning the regional CAMRA Pub of the Year award.
That was amazing.
Beating 1,400-ish other establishments.
Yes.
That's
We never would have dreamed to have got that far, but we did, and we were overwhelmed when we won it. So,
Wow.
I wouldn't expect to do it again, but it would be nice.
Well, it's an amazing success story from a standing start 4 years ago to regional awards, local awards, coming through COVID in one piece, acquiring full ownership of the establishment, building a business. It's a success story, and it's really lovely to see it, because, as you said, all we hear is bad news. So it's quite nice to know that some people
it's a shame.
who've got a bit of a backbone can get on and make something happen.
Yeah, so finally, we got something in common. We're all David Bowie fans.
We are all David Bowie fans.
Yes, some of us pronounce it Bowie, which is the correct way to do it.
Did you say Bowie or Bowie?
Bowie.
Ah, see, Bowie is how I pronounce it. Are you a Bowie? Bowie. You see?
I don't really have an opinion on it. Whatever comes out of
He
my mouth.
pronounces it Bowie. So
The dog answered to it. So. But yes, we are David Bowie fans, and as it happened, our pub dog, as brilliant as he's turned out to be, a pub dog, wasn't pub dog. He's nearly 8 years old, and we got him just after David Bowie had passed away. So it was just a situation of, when we were playing the name game, that you go around the houses like you always do, and it was on the news all the time, wasn't it, about David Bowie? And I said, you want to call him Bowie next? And Luby and Dexter, my son, both looked at each other and said, I quite like that. And we went round the houses again and again and again, but we kept coming back to Bowie, and that's why Bowie is what he is.
Well,
fantastic.
My oldest son is named after David Bowie.
Is he?
David rather than Bowie. And Heroes was the first dance that we had at our wedding. So
Very good.
Lucky enough to see him twice in the 80s.
Oh, I never saw him, unfortunately.
When I think of Heroes, I always think of the 2012 Olympics, when the British team came out to Heroes and they scattered all that confetti everywhere, and I thought that was a great moment in time, that was, and the perfect use.
That's brilliant.
For that song.
Yeah.
That was great.
Everyone seems to remember where they were at the 2012 Olympics, don't they?
Yeah.
We were on the East Coast.
I was in Florida because I had a massive hissy fit because I couldn't get tickets for anything. So I decided that I wasn't going to stay.
I'm going away.
Brilliant. So we'll draw that part of our podcast to an end. I really want to thank you for your time.
Absolute pleasure.
That was easy, wasn't it? Should have come here again and do that.
Well, come on, fish and chip night.
That's a great idea. Fantastic.
Fish and chip night. There's live music night on the 18th of November.
There you go.
There's
that
the
plug
Christmas disco on the 16th of December with DJs Russ and DJ Dom on the vinyl. Funk, soul and disco.
Where?
In there. This place turns into a nightclub on those kind of nights.
That would be cosy.
It will. It is.
Fantastic. Brill. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
When rain stops play, it's time for some pub natter. So, for part 2, we're here with Rich Harris. We're going to have a natter with him. Rich is the chairman of CAMRA, which is the Campaign for Real Ale, big organisation throughout UK. Rich is going to be telling us about that in a moment. But why don't we just start by you giving us a little bit about your background and how you kind of moved from retirement and getting involved into CAMRA.
Yeah, I came over to Rutland about 5 years ago. My wife and I were retired and didn't know anybody in the area. And I happened to see that Rutland CAMRA were holding a beer festival and they were looking for volunteers. And having in my working life been involved in the licence trade to the extent that we'd run a pub and had an outside bar business.
Oh, really? So where was your pub?
In Herefordshire.
Oh, right.
The Walwyn Arms on the border of Herefordshire and Gloucestershire. A little village called Muchmarcle.
Nice.
Yeah, lovely part of the country.
Yeah.
So we were there for a few years. That was just a small part of my working life. But anyway, when I got to Rutland, saw that there was a beer festival being held within about a 10-minute walk of my house. I thought, well, I don't know anybody here. Be a good way to meet some people, and I've always enjoyed a beer myself. So I rocked up at the festival to volunteer, and that was the start of the relationship with Rutland CAMRA.
So what's the goal of CAMRA? What's CAMRA hoping to achieve?
Well, CAMRA was established in 1971, and it's being viewed, or is viewed as one of the most successful consumer rights campaigns, certainly in Europe, in the fact that it was all about preserving real ale, and that was the objective that was set out by a bunch of guys that met in a pub in St Albans in 1971,
So sorry to interrupt you. How do they do that? How do they put pressure on companies?
I'm not 100% sure, to be honest, how they did it initially. I was thinking about it today in anticipation of this evening's podcast, and I really struggled to see how something like that would happen today. It must have taken an awful lot of dedication and hard work, lobbying of an awful lot of people, but it's been from its primary objective of preserving real ale, then it's been a tremendous success. I mean, despite the pandemic, we've still got an awful lot of, thriving independent brewers, and real ale is there as part of the drinks market, when back in 1971, I think when they set it up, they feared that by 1975 there wouldn't be such a thing as real ale.
Wow.
It's been a fantastic achievement, but I don't really understand how it could have worked, because I wasn't around.
Because
you're involved in it at that stage.
I think in that time all the pubs, or most of the pubs, were tied, weren't they? And the big brewers are just becoming stronger and stronger and stronger, and producing the mass-produced
that would have certainly been
keg beer.
a big factor.
Do you think that that CAMRA has inadvertently provided a springboard for the proliferation of craft beers and microbrewers that we've had over the last 10, 15 years?
I do think so, yes. The fact that it has re-established real ale as a significant part of the drinks business, and and brewers, nobody's going to set up a brewery and think I can make cask ale if there's no market for it, obviously. No. So we've re-established that. Very much been a big factor.
In a way, what you're doing is you're telling beer manufacturers what it is that people want, because unless there's a voice of opinion, they're not gonna be able to deliver that, are they?
No, that's right. I mean, it's totally a consumer-led organisation, and so it is our members, which we've got just over 150,000.
Wow.
Worldwide, that is, with probably about 145,000 of them in this country, spread across 200 branches throughout the UK. And so that's the voice, it is things like our Good Beer Guide, our awards for beers, Champion Beer of Britain awards, the awards that go out to the pubs, our Pubs of the Year awards, etc., like that, all boost the profile of real ale within the industry.
Fantastic. Wow. So tell us how you would define a real ale.
Well, I'll tell you how I would define a real ale, and then I'll tell you what CAMRA have done recently. I would define a real ale, and when I first got involved with CAMRA, my thinking on it and what I've always appreciated as a real ale before I was involved with CAMRA was what is a cask-conditioned ale. So it's an ale that when it's produced from the brewery, there's still a live fermentation process going on. It gets delivered into the pub. It gets finished off in the pub, basically.
So how it's delivered to the pub? It's still growing.
Yes,
still yeast
exactly.
in there.
Yeah.
And then it gets finished off. What does that mean?
Basically, the fermentation process continues. The cask gets tapped, and then within about, depending on the beer, from 12 to 24, maybe 36 hours, is then in prime condition for serving. And then that probably lasts for about 4 or 5 days, depending on the beer. Some would only be in prime condition for 3 days. Some of the stouts and porters, the darker beers might last a little bit longer.
Wow.
But it's a live product, and that's the key to a real ale. It's not been pasteurised. It's not served under gas pressure or anything like that. It's a live product that is being finished off in.
And you've got to get
cellar.
rid of it in 3 days.
That is one of the challenges for landlords, and that is why you will occasionally, unfortunately, get a pint. You'll go in and say, well, this doesn't taste like it should, because they've kept it on for that extra 24 hours, because they want to maximise the return on the barrel. But, of course, that could be seen as a bit short-sighted, because you might not go back into that pub again because the beer was off last time. So it's a really tough one for pubs in these times, I think, which is why pubs that, like, here we are at the Railway tonight, which has got 4 ales on, which is a credit to Jamie that he's able to keep that number on, but it's a reflection of also the turnover and the number of people he gets coming through the pub. Because without that, then
how obvious is it if a beer's past its best? I'm not an ale drinker myself.
It's very obvious. I mean,
do you
I
have to
haven't
be a
got
bit
the
of a
most
connoisseur, or would anybody?
Not at all. No. You don't have to have the most discerning palate. You can smell it. You don't even have to taste it. If it starts to get that sour smell, it's very, very obvious.
So essentially, if a pub belongs to CAMRA, then it's a CAMRA advertised pub. You know that you're going to be able to go along there and get a pint, and it's going to be within those 3 days.
Well, if it's a CAMRA recommended pub, or it's in the CAMRA Good Beer Guide, for example, then yes, you would hope that would be the case. You can't guarantee it, of course.
Sure.
But the idea that CAMRA is totally independent of all licensees and all pubs. We're a consumer group based on members of the public. Landlords can join, but they join as a member of the public. We don't show fair or favour to any pub. We treat them all even-handedly, even pubs that don't serve real ale. They obviously won't get in our Good Beer Guide and won't win our awards, but from a CAMRA perspective, and going back to the initial objectives of CAMRA were to preserve real ale, I think largely that's been done. So what CAMRA are much more focused on now is the preservation of all of our pubs and our breweries.
Sure.
We certainly our pubs that are in our Good Beer Guide, we would expect those. If you went into the pub there, you would expect to get a quality pint of ale, but it can't be guaranteed. Landlords could change, etc.
Yeah. CAMRA have actually become quite a powerful lobbying organisation. So they kind of almost work on 2 levels. There's the day-to-day interaction with the pubs, but there's a core that speaks to government and tries to get taxation policy and duty policy changed to just give a little bit of extra help to landlords and brewers. to allow them to continue to exist and to continue to thrive. They don't always get what they want, but they are a very powerful voice.
Yeah, that's very much the case. At the moment, CAMRA have sent out to all of our branches, or National CAMRA, a template letter that you can that they recommend or request that we send through to our local MP with some of the information about things that are being looked for in the autumn statement from the Chancellor. So it's quite, if you've got 145,000 members chose to send those emails in to their MPs, then it is quite a powerful voice. So it's not. So the government, I think, does recognise that CAMRA is quite a force for good, certainly within the drinks industry.
Cool.
And I think most publicans do too, and certainly breweries.
So if I wanted to become a member, what would I need to do?
Visit www.rutland.camera.org.uk, or possibly, if Jamie's got some leaflets here in the railway, pick one up and complete it. It's very easy to join. We're a very friendly branch. We've now got here in Rutland 217 members. At our recent beer festival, we managed to recruit 25 new members. That was partly due to the fact that if you join at a CAMRA beer festival, you do get £20 back in vouchers to be spent at the festival.
That's not bad.
So it does
good scheme,
encourage you to join. As soon as the membership's only about 28 quid, I think.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer, as far as I'm concerned.
But it's very much we're a very sociable bunch. I mean, one of the issues we have, if we're completely honest, is we're a fairly mature bunch within Rutland CAMRA. Reflects the demographic of the county, age demographic of the county to a large degree. But you will find that Sheffield branch of CAMRA, for example, being a big university town or city, has got a much more varied age demographic. So, but that's something we would really like to address at Rutland CAMRA. But we're struggling, I'll be honest, to attract younger members.
So I've got a question. I've seen a term that I don't know what it means, and that's live beer.
Live beer.
I've not seen that before. So
this is going back to it's a term CAMRA introduced as part of their description to replace the term real ale. Because. I think because of the change in nature of the brewing industry with a lot of the craft beers that had emerged in the last 10 years or so, that they decided that rather than just term it real ale, which goes back to what I was saying earlier about purely the cask-conditioned ale, then live beer is any beer where the fermentation process is still continuing when it's actually been put in its delivery container.
Sure.
So that can be a bottle or a can or a key keg or a cask-conditioned ale, which is where real ale, sort of the definition of real ale, was focused on initially. So it's a beer where the fermentation process is still going on. So
it's broadening in the description, isn't it? It's keep it the same. It's the same method, but the container can be different.
That's right. So cask-conditioned ale is a subset of live beer.
Right.
Okay, that's the way it sort of is. CAMRA would portray it these days.
I wasn't even aware you could get live beer in tins. Were you?
Only because I've been to the Keswick brewery tour. And that was when I first came across the term live beer. And they actually have a price list for all their beers. The one's live and the other one is keg, I think. And they're two different prices. Yep. I think the keg is cheaper because it lasts for longer.
That would probably be the reason.
I think you explained to me when we chatted offline, you can have beer that's pressurised provided the CO2 is outside. There's like a bag inside the keg, and the CO2 is between the keg and the bag, so the beer doesn't ever come into contact with it.
The CO2 doesn't come into contact. Any CO2 that comes with a live beer or a cask-conditioned beer should actually emanate, or should actually be derived from the beer itself, rather than being forced into the keg, like you would be, like a lager would be served, for example, which is served under CO2 coming into the keg, or the beers that CAMRA were battling against back in 1971. You know, I don't want to badmouth, but you know, a pint of John Smith's, for example, keg John Smith's. John Smith's probably makes a great cask ale these days. I'm unsure, but certainly their keg ale would be, because those sorts of beers, like lagers, have been pasteurised actually before they get into. That obviously kills off any further fermentation or anything like that going on. So they're not live beers.
What is the perceived advantage of a live beer over a keg beer? Is it taste? Is it flavour?
It's flavour. Yeah. You get
and
much
that
more
just gets lost in the process, does it? Once you start introducing CO2 and pasteurisation and the like.
Yeah. It loses a lot of its body and its flavour, and that's basically what it's. They become much more bland without the full flavour like the beer we're drinking today. There's a lot more taste in that than you would find if you were just drinking a keg beer. So it's all about the flavour and the taste.
So moving on from that, does the flavour get affected hugely by whatever you store it in? So if you have it in a bottle or a tin or in wood or in metal, does that affect the flavour?
I think it does to a degree. I mean, when you say, I mean, it's a stainless steel keg, a plastic keg, which are coming more into the market these days. And I think wooden casks are very much, there's not many of those about, and you'd struggle to get beer served in a wooden cask. I mean, obviously that's been lined anyway. It's not just wood these days. It hasn't been for, probably best part of 60, 70 years.
Is that because of expense?
The wood?
Yeah.
I think...
Because obviously it's used in wine making all the time, isn't
yeah,
it?
but I think it was cost, really, in stainless steel, and wooden casks are a lot more, subject to damage than a stainless steel cask, which came in probably in the post the war, I should think. I don't know exactly, but I'm imagining stainless steel kegs probably came in.
Cool.
50s, 60s, something like that, I would think.
So what in his red barrel was a gimmick, not a real thing.
Yeah.
Shall we discuss lager?
Well, bring me into the conversation. My name's Justin Perry and I'm a lager drinker.
Do you know, I have to say, I lived in Germany for a few years and I tasted some amazing lagers in Germany. But I don't know whether you would describe it as a lager. It's the same sort of colour, but the flavours are awesome and they're different. And they have really good wheat beers over there as well.
Yeah.
And they're seriously good beers.
Some of the German pilsners are very good. Not the really heavy ones. They're too much for me. But some of the lighter pilsners are very. There's a much more taste to them. Even as a lager drinker, I stay away from some of the sort of mass-produced, 10.99 for 18 things. Try to have something with a bit of flavour. But the reason I gave up drinking bitter, because when I first started drinking, I drank bitter. I found that I could drink Courage Best, which was what was in my local, and I'd be fine. And I went to another pub and drank Courage Best, and I'd be ill. And you could not tell from one place to the next why the same beer would be fine in one place, and sometimes it smelt a bit, kind of a fruity, sweet smell as you was drinking it, and then that was normally a sign that it wasn't going to be a good night. So, whereas lager is the same wherever you go, it's the same, and so that's why I switched, because it was just more predictable.
Well, that's the thing with the lagers that we predominantly get in this country. You can get live conditioned lagers. I think Peroni actually make one, Peroni Cruda, I think it might be called. And there's probably others out there. I'm not an expert in this field at all, but that the lagers that you would normally get served in pubs in this country are all pasteurised before they hit before they leave the brewery, and they're served under CO2 being injected into the cask to force the lager out. And the shelf life on a cask of lager is a month compared to the shelf life, probably even more, possibly. Yeah, but that's compared to the shelf life on a real ale. Like I said, once it's tapped, you've probably got 5 or 6 days on it. So, so from a publican's point of view, it's a lot easier and a lot less hassle, to sell lager.
Sure.
And from a punter's point of view, if you've had a bad experience with real ale like you had, Justin, then yeah, why not drink lager then?
I had many bad experiences, but it didn't stop me trying.
It's amazing how
Maybe you
quickly
should
you
try
forget.
again then, Justin. Welcome
I
back.
have to say, I
Welcome
have
back.
started to creep into some IPAs now and
Okay.
again. So I'm starting to come back into the fold, but it's a slow process.
So, Rich, what's the best beer you've ever drunk?
Ever.
Well, your favourite. I suppose that's the same question, really, isn't it?
Yeah. My favourite beer at the moment, and I said this before they won Champion Beer of Britain for the premium IPA category, is Electric Landlady from just up the road here. I always seek that out. If there's a pub selling that, then I will go there, and I think a well-served pint of that is top notch. That's one
Where's
of my
that brewed?
favourite. Just up the road here in Ketton, Baker's
Oh, right.
Dozen. Yeah, I mean it won Champion Beer of Britain this year in the premium pale ale category, which is a fantastic achievement for a little 2-person operation up the road.
Wow.
Absolutely wonderful beer. But I think your palate changes
Sure.
over the years. I remember when I used to live and work down in London, I lived in Chiswick, and
Fuller's.
I thought Fuller's London Pride was an excellent pint, and
Yeah.
would always be drinking that. I also used to like Wadworth 6X.
Yeah.
But now Electric Landlady is my favourite pint.
I used to live in Yorkshire for a bit, and there's a beer up there called Rigvelter. Have you heard of it? It's strong, and it's got on the pump. It's got a picture of a sheep that's upside down, which kind of says it all, really. But
Yeah.
but that was a really good pint, and that's memorable. I've not seen it about. Who you can't hear. Jamie is here, and he says it might be getting some. Now I can honestly say that if you do, I'll be down there for a pint.
Looks like I'm going to be designated driver again, doesn't it?
It's a deal.
Oh dear. So before one last question before we call it a day. In evening, even perry and cider. Now I love cider, especially in the summer. I think it's a fantastic drink.
Yeah, it is.
So
It is.
are CAMRA involved?
Oh, very much so.
In ciders?
Since 1985, CAMRA have had a policy with regards to supporting the production and sales of real ale and real cider and
Real
perry.
cider.
And for it to be classed as real cider and perry, it must be made from 100% pressed apple or pear juice, no concentrate. So that would rule out things like Strongbow or some of the Thatcher's ciders are probably we would consider, or CAMRA would consider real ciders, but it has to be made from freshly pressed apple and pear juice.
As a consumer, when you pitch up in a pub, how do you know if it's a cider equivalent of a real ale?
You would probably have to ask, because unless it's a very small cider producer probably who really prides himself on the fact that they are making it from 100% juice and not concentrate, then the bigger cider producers won't be telling you.
So that's a really handy hint for our listeners to ask is the cider made from 100% pressed apples?
Freshly pressed
and
apple
pears,
or
if it's
pears,
perry.
Perry, yeah.
That's cool.
But it's very much part of CAMRA's overall philosophy is the preservation of real cider and perry.
Do CAMRA provide lists of brands of cider that they would consider to be real cider.
They do. I think you can find it on their website, I think, with regards to the definition, under the definitions of real cider. I believe you can find it on there.
Because I suspect in some pubs, if you ask the landlord what the cider's made from, they'd shrug their shoulders and not know, they'd think you were mad.
Yeah.
So I think maybe if you try to find some ciders that you know are correct and then try to find pubs that are selling them, if you're keen to try them, that's probably the right way to
It's
go.
a good idea.
Yeah. It's one of the things that we as Rutland CAMRA recognise, that we haven't been particularly focused on ciders and perries. And we do have a page on our website with very limited information on it, but what we plan to do is have that updated with the list of pubs around the county that are serving real cider and perries, just so
So
that
that's the
consumers are aware of that.
Rutland CAMRA website.
Yes,
So what's the address for that?
Rutland, www.rutland.camera.org.uk.
Thank you. So that's, do you know, what an educated evening that's been. I have learnt loads.
And I might be persuaded to start trying to drink some of these real ales now. Tear myself away from the delights of Peroni, and other lagers are available.
Yeah. So, Rich, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I've enjoyed chatting. Thanks, guys.
No worries. When rain stops play, it's time for some pub natter. I just wanted to let you know about our next 3 episodes, which will be a Christmas special, which focus on our armed forces veterans and the organisations and volunteers that support them. Having served in the Royal Air Force for 22 years, this is something close to my heart, and one that requires more than one episode. Over the Christmas period, we're going to tell the story of the Armed Forces Breakfast Clubs, which started off a few years ago with a few military veterans meeting up on Saturdays in a local garage for a bacon sandwich and a chat. It has now become the biggest military veterans community in UK and is now starting to grow globally. In the first episode, we natter with Derek Hardman, the veteran who is responsible for creating the concept and managing the organisation. Episodes 2 and 3 were recorded in the Grain Store pub during the December Rutland Armed Forces Breakfast Club. We natter with some of the veterans and people who are supporting them. Do not miss our natter with John Bomber Beckett, a 95-year-old veteran. If you have an interest in the armed forces, you are a military veteran or know or have known a military veteran, you will love listening to these discussions. There is also lots of useful information relating to helping ex-servicemen who may be having mental or physical health-related issues. So, that's a wrap. And thank you for listening to our latest Pub Natter. If you visit timothyives.com/Pub Natter, you will find photos, links, and more information about each episode. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and please subscribe to ensure you don't miss a pub or one of our amazing guests. The Pub Natter theme tune is by Tom Arnold. That was a Pub Natter broadcast.